are listening to the Slash and Cast Podcast Network.
I tried to create living zombies.
Reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
God, give me strength.
All I gotta do is relax and they'll take me to their death.
Last chance to evacuate Earth before it is recycled.
This is a wicked, wicked world.
We are all evil in some form or another.
Welcome back, Mysterians. Thank you for tuning in to our live stream. Today I'm drinking a Quiddy Viddy. Interesting name for the brewing company from St. John's, Newfoundland. It's pretty good. Pretty good beer. It is a dry Irish stout. Good stuff. Dark beer. That is a good beer. It's got a little bit of, I'd say a little bit of coffee, a little bit of caramel notes in there, but it's good. Gotta have the family around sometimes, so I'm having a good time, and I hope you are too. And if not, we'll see if we can change that. Of course, I missed some stuff in the chat. Hopefully you don't see my feet in this. We'll find out if you do or not, now that I can't see. But it is a beautiful face. Thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. Let me just make sure the cat's not going to knock my beer over. What are you doing? I love you, but gotta have my beer. It's always great time around here. Hey, yes, it's always a great time. I feel like Mr. Rogers, the Mr. Rogers of horror and supernatural phenomenon. That reminds me, I should watch Mr. Rogers again. I was watching this really cool program. What was it called? Werewolves Within. I'm going to say I didn't like the ending, but I liked everything else about it. It was a pretty good show, but they talked about Mr. Rogers on there, and I thought, oh, that's so wholesome. That's so wonderful. I like a good variety in my beer, right? I apologize that there's traffic out here. It is a big claim. The Mr. Rogers of horror, that is a big claim, but I'm doing it. So today we're talking about the Enfield poltergeist. Normally I record like a little intro and I have some music, but we're doing this live. I'm just going to do it live. So I'm just going to jump right in. So in 1977, a family of 4 was tormented in their Enfield home. So Enfield in London, England, I believe. Now, they were tormented by a barrage of poltergeist activity and some malicious spirits. This family lived at the infamous house on 284 Green Street. I say infamous because we'll go into this at the end, probably near the end of the episode. We'll talk about the family that moved in after them. The family that moved in after the, I believe this is the Hodgsons, they only stayed there for a couple months, but we'll get into it at the end here. Also, I apologize. My neighbors, for some reason, I don't know what they're doing over there, but they've been rowdy all day. I feel like they're having a party, and I'm a little bit upset that I wasn't invited. So if you hear, while we're talking about this, if you hear banging or you hear knocking on the walls or anything like that, it's just my neighbors. It's not a poltergeist, okay? I promise. So Peggy, she was the head of this household. She was a single mother of 4, and she was in disbelief when her daughters, 11-year-old Janet and 12-year-old Margaret, when they told her that their dresser was moving on its own. She became a believer after the dresser came to life and smashed against the girls' bedroom door, which barricaded them inside. Now, Peggy, when she saw this, she could actually open the door and look inside and see that the dresser was pushed against the door. And she couldn't figure out how to free the girls from inside. And she thought that they were just, as they say in England, mucking about. That's a good one for Hassan from the Nerd Alternative, all the wonderful crew from the Nerd Alternative. Shout out to the Nerd Alternative. You should check them out if you haven't already. And maybe I'll drop a promo at the end of this episode in when I drop it on streaming services. But in a Channel 4 documentary, years after the incident, Janet said that, quote, "It started in a back bedroom. The chest of drawers moved and you could hear shuffling. And Mom said, I want you to pack it in." So again, I'm imagining that means cut it out. Now, Janet also said, quote, "We told her what was going on, and she came to see it for herself. She saw the chest of drawers moving, so the dresser, and when she tried to push it back, she couldn't. Now, Peggy, she could see that this was moving and it wasn't the girls who was moving it. So that right there, if I saw that myself, that would be enough evidence for me to GTFO, as they say. So for over 18 months, the Hodgson's family was terrorized by banging on the walls, writing on the walls, which is a good Under Oath album, just saying, as well as furniture and household objects flying across the room. So these objects were being propelled. They were thrown across the room by invisible forces. And in addition to that, Peggy also stated that things would spontaneously catch fire, empty cups would spill over with water, and voices would shoot out in the middle of the night. Would shout out in the middle of the night. Shoot out, shout out, same thing. These voices are disembodied voices that are haunting and terrifying. Whether they're shooting out or shouting out, it's the same thing. They're not having a good time here. So what's really interesting, I'm sorry, the cat is trying to climb up on the edge of my chair here. She loves to jump up and just nestle in my lap. It's beautiful, but maybe not today. So the interesting thing about this haunting is how many witnesses there are. After the incident with the dresser, Peggy was convinced that something was happening. So she went next door because she couldn't get the door open and she was worried for the girl's safety. She went next door to get her friend or their neighbor. Their neighbor was a hulking construction worker. That's how he's been described in a couple of things, or bulky. I don't know if I feel comfortable describing this gentleman as bulky, but he is a big dude. That's what we're getting at here. And when he arrived to help out the girls, help out Peggy, he heard that there was phantom knocking all throughout the house. So there was banging on the walls and a knocking, and he said the knocking was coming from the walls, like the outside walls where no one could be, and the ceiling where no one would be unless they were in the attic. So that's a really interesting thing for him to witness, right? It's interesting how many witnesses there are in this case. So at this point, the Hodgsons, they called the police because they're white. They're British and they're white. So yeah, let's call the cops. We have nothing to worry about. So they called the police, which proved to be of absolutely no use. The constable at the scene did include something in her report, though, and this is another thing where it solidifies that there actually was something happening, because the police were even there, and the constable, the female constable that was there, she wrote, quote, "A large armchair moved unassisted 4 feet across the floor." So that's a little frightening right there, is this chair moving across the floor. So she even investigated further, determining there were no hidden wires or mechanical parts. That's terrifying. That's frightening to me. The fact that she actually investigated further and there's actually no evidence that there was any sort of manipulation from a lever or a wire or anything like that, which is really, really interesting to me that she took the time to investigate this further, because she said she was frightened. She was taken aback that this chair had moved on its own, and she investigated and found no evidence. Don't you just love loud trucks? She found no evidence of manipulation of the chair or any foul play. Now, at this point, the family approached various media outlets with their neighbors being frightened, the police being frightened. They said, well, let's get some investigators in here. Let's go. I believe it was the Daily Mail or the Daily Mirror and the BBC. So those were just some of several media outlets that had sent reporters or sent investigators to the home. So the family approached these outlets, these media outlets, and many of them reported strange occurrences. One of them, I believe it was from the Daily Mirror. The gentleman who was sent there, he said that it was insane. I believe he's the one who captured some of the photographs that we shared on social media. There's a photograph of Janet. It seems like she's levitating in the air. Some skeptics believe that she pulled an Om Shinrikyo, where she jumped up out of the bed or jumped up out into the air. But it does kind of look like she is being levitated or being forced up into the air. And so these various media outlets, they reported that there were strange occurrences. They also reported that their equipment was being tampered with or it had malfunctioned. that some of the wiring had gone bad without anybody actually opening up the cables. And they had also reported that a lot of their footage was being erased. So there were all these odd occurrences happening at the Hodgkins family home. So I'd never heard of Quiddy Viddy before. I've been to St. John's, Newfoundland. I've actually never seen any Quiddy Viddy there, but it's pretty good beer. I think I had another one. Yes, I had a Quiddy Viddy sour after the last live episode. I was on a Discord chat and I had a, oh man, Quiddy Viddy, the sour beer that I had was delicious. It was absolutely phenomenal. I'm really hoping that I get a beer sponsorship at some point. One of these craft breweries should really sponsor the show because I'm doing a lot of work for you here. I'm doing a lot of legwork. So now we get to the point in our story where the family is almost run out of options. So now they recruit Maurice Grosse. I hope I'm saying that right. Grosse. I don't think he's a grossy. I think he's just gross. So they recruited Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair. I think it's Lyon, but I don't know. So these guys are paranormal investigators from the Society for Cyclical Research. The Society for Cyclical Research. Try saying that 8 times fast. Now, Maurice had the following to say about his first few days in the home. Quote, "When I first got there, nothing happened for a while. Now, that's not unusual. A lot of paranormal experiences, a lot of paranormal entities, what do they call it? It's basically they're shy, right? They don't want people to believe the people that are being haunted because they don't want to be cast out. And if people don't believe them, then they can continue haunting these people, right? So he also said, then I experienced Lego pieces flying across the room and marbles as well being propelled across the room. But the extraordinary thing was when you picked them up, they were hot. That's an interesting thing, right? In the Baldoon mystery episode, we talked about how these rocks, these stones and bullets were being propelled through the home and had ended up falling straight down onto the floor. And we also discussed how the stones and these bullets were marked with X's or some sort of thing. What's really interesting is these poltergeists, these entities, they're manipulating objects like stones and marbles. But in the Baldoon mystery, the idea was that the stones and the bullets were just falling straight down. However, in this haunting, in this poltergeist or paranormal activity event, they're saying that the marbles, the objects that are being thrown around, they're hot to the touch afterwards. So that's a really interesting thing as well. The poltergeist would torment the children by grabbing their legs and pinning them to the ground. It would also lift them off the ground as well as hurl them across the room. And we had already talked about how the young children were forced into the air like they were levitating. The pounding on the walls, the spontaneous levitation, and the swirling of household objects, it really took their toll on the family, and the family had had enough. They were all frightened. They were all terrified. Obviously, they were scared because they had called in the authorities. They had called in friends and neighbors. They had even called the SPC, or is it SPR? I want to make sure I get that right. SPR, the Society for Cyclical Research. SPR, my apologies, not SPC. So this poltergeist, at one point, all 4 of them, they ended up sharing a bedroom and sleeping in that one bedroom and leaving the lights on. One of the reasons why they did this was because of Janet's voices. So something was able to manipulate Janet, and it was able to cause her to speak in a different tone of voice. Now, she became possessed with this gravelly voice of a grumpy old man, and his name was Bill Wilkins. Now, Bill Wilkins, speaking through this 11-year-old girl, through 11-year-old Janet, he described his own death in vivid detail. And it's not too vivid, it's not too graphic, it's not too graphic for the Mr. Rogers of horror. So Bill said the following. Remember, he said this through Janet. "Just before I died, I went blind, and then I had an hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in the chair in the corner of downstairs." I'm assuming that when Bill says, "Oh, I had an hemorrhage," he's actually saying like he had a brain hemorrhage. So he went blind, he had a brain hemorrhage, and then he died in that chair. Gonna have another few swigs of this delicious beer. Honestly, I'm not usually a huge fan of dark beers. Like, I really enjoy Guinness, but there's some, like, more stouty beers that are just too much for me. But this is great. This isn't, like, overpoweringly bitter. It's really smooth and refreshing. This is a really good Irish stout. And the best part is, it's getting caught in my beard. And my mustache, I guess. I'm not pouring it down my face. It's getting caught in my mustache, which is wonderful because now I can have some for later. I heard someone the other day, they called my mustache. They said, you have a really nice muzzy. And then another guy said, I really like your flavor saver. I thought that one was great. Your flavor saver. What's really interesting about this voice that Janet is projecting, this possession by Bill, is that Bill's son actually confirmed that that's how Bill died in that house. So Bill's death was a real thing. It was a real occurrence, right? And now his son confirms that that's exactly how he died. So how does this 11-year-old girl know that the previous owner of her home, how does she know his name? How does she know how he died? And how does she know what he sounds like? Now, his son didn't confirm that that was Bill's voice, but I'll actually play this. I'll put this into the full episode.
Right, that's good. Alright. Shut up and door. I'm 72 years old. I come from Jewett Park graveyard. And I have right near the church where Rena lives. And all my friends come from there as well. And we all make a game and go to the pub. And then we pick your house. Because I used to live here. And I will tell you some more. And if you don't tell anyone else, just let Mr. Hook and Mr. Playback.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died. Just before you died and just after you died.
2 years before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
Bill, if you're there, would you answer me the following question? What have you done with Denise's 30p?
Headed down to the radio downstairs.
Sorry, Bill, can you say that again, please?
Headed down to the radio downstairs.
Righto, Bill, I'll go and look. Thanks so much. Why can't Janet feel you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible?
So I'm a G-H-O-S-T.
Did any friends go with you?
Yes, all of them. All the dogs, 68 dogs.
So what do you got 68 dogs for?
So that they can protect me from you killing me. They can bite your head off.
How can we kill you, Bill?
You can shoot me off.
Now how can we shoot you if we can't see you, Bill?
By praying to God.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Bill.
By praying to God.
By praying to God. So, what you're saying is we couldn't get rid of you by praying to God.
Yes.
it's actually really crazy to hear Janet speak in this gravelly voice, but it's really insane. It sounds like an old man's voice. Skeptics will say that Janet was just faking it, that she was manipulating her voice to sound like an old man, right? But like that kind of was a little bit difficult for me to do. For her to constantly do that all the time, like for like, you know, at least 30 minutes at a time, she would just ruin her voice. But it's really crazy to hear this 11-year-old girl speak like that. One part that's really interesting that you'll hear if you listen to the episode after it airs is that Janet, or excuse me, I guess it's not Janet, I guess it's Bill, but Bill speaking through Janet, they ask, how come we can't see you? And the ghost says, because I'm invisible. And the interviewer says, well, why are you invisible? And Bill says, because I'm a GHOST. So I thought that was really funny. I thought that was really funny because this ghost has got a lot of sass. Like, it's a sassy ass ghost. What else is really interesting about this is that Janet, when she was interviewed as an adult, years after the incident, she says that she doesn't remember being in trances. She doesn't remember speaking in voices, but she was very shocked and surprised to see photographs of her actually speaking in this voice, or photographs of her being possessed or being in these trances. She said that was really surprising to her because she doesn't remember any of it. So that's another interesting thing, is like she kind of blacks out when she speaks in these voices. So Janet, like I said, years after she was interviewed, I believe it was for a Channel 4 documentary, but she stated that she didn't truly know if these ghostly forces were malevolent. She didn't know if they were malicious. She stated that she believed the spirit of Bill Wilkins, that he had died in the house, and that he was simply wishing to reconnect with humans, to reconnect with the mortal realm, if you were, and to maybe even be a part of her family. But to be honest with you, I am a bit of a skeptic about this fact of Bill wanting to be a part of her family, and of the ghost not being malicious, because there's a point where the curtains come around and wrap around Janet's neck. So she's sitting on her bed or sitting wherever she is, and the curtains float up into the air, and it wraps around her neck, and it begins to strangle her. And it lifts her up into the air, is wrapping tightly around her neck, bruising and choking her, and it's pulling her up into the air. So if it wasn't for her mother and other people being in the room, or her mother and other people sleeping in the room with her, Janet would probably be dead. The idea is that this ghost tried to hang her. So without her mother's help, without the help of others in the home, this ghost would have hung Janet by her neck until she died. So I'm going to say that this ghost isn't friendly, because most of my friends don't play with me like that. You know, maybe you can choke me a little bit, but there's a safe word. Janet herself will admit that the girls did fake some of the phenomena. So there's an incident where the investigators for the SPR, they saw the girls bending spoons, trying to pull a Neo from the Matrix. They're bending spoons, and there was another incident where they were banging on the floor below where everyone was standing. So they're banging on the floor, trying to make it sound like there's knocking noises all over. They're banging on the floor like an old lady that lives below you, right? You're making too much noise. But the idea that kind of, puts my mind at ease about this is that Janet is willing to admit that they did that. Janet and Margaret both faked some of the incidents, and their reasoning is that they were either trying to mess with them, or they were trying to see if they could tell what was real and what was fake, to see the credibility of the investigators themselves. So Janet said in an interview that, when she was asked, how much of this did you really fake? She said about 2%. So she is admitting that she did fake some of it, but to be honest with you, I personally believe that there was something happening here, because there's really no evidence that there was anything besides a poltergeist, anything besides a malevolent spirit affecting this household. There's no real evidence that proves otherwise. One thing that's really interesting is that Janet says that she was playing with a Ouija board with her sister before the incidents began, before the poltergeist activity occurred. So I was talking with somebody today about a Ouija board, and they were stating how they didn't believe it. They just did it for fun. To be honest with you, even if you don't believe it, sometimes spirits believe in you. Am I right? So Janet had the following to say about her childhood. This is a quote from her. It was an extraordinary case. It's one of the most recognized cases of paranormal activity in the world, but for me it was quite daunting. I think it really left its mark. The activities, the newspaper attention, the different people in and out of the house. It wasn't a normal childhood. I don't know how many of you know this, but the Enfield poltergeist, it was the inspiration for The Conjuring 2. It was also the basis, obviously, of the Enfield Haunting series, but it was also the basis for a series called Ghost Watch, which was actually banned for a while. It's still banned. I think it's a BBC mockumentary. They make it seem like there's actual paranormal activity, actual poltergeist activity. And I believe there was a suicide because of the airing of that show. But the Enfield poltergeist inspired Ghost Watch, which is another interesting fact. But unlike The Conjuring 2 and unlike the Enfield Haunting series, the real life Hodgsons, they didn't have a happy ending. There was no, everything solved and we can all go about our lives, right? It didn't work like that. The poltergeist activity did decline after a priest visited the home, and I believe he blessed the home, but the activity didn't stop. It did decline, but it didn't completely stop. And the next family, like I said earlier in the episode, where we finally made it here, the next family that lived in the home on Green Street, they reported that they saw phantom ghostly men entering different rooms of the house. They also reported that disembodied voices were haunting them throughout the home. And these factors were enough to frighten these people, and they ended up actually leaving the home. So it was only a couple months. I think it was only 2 months that these people lived in the home after the Hodgsons, and they were done. They moved out. They had enough. So before I devour some more of this delicious beer, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about the Enfield Haunting, because it is a really good series, and I believe that they stuck to the story pretty well. Like, obviously there's a few liberties that they took and a few things that changed, but I think they stuck to the story pretty well. Hi, kitty cat. Hi, kitty cat. You coming up? Oh, goodness. I guess the cat's gonna join me. So, you have to stay. You have to stay over here, though. This 3-part series, The Enfield Haunting, it was directed by Christopher Nyholm. This guy also directed episodes of the Danish version of The Killing and the movie The Vanishing. So I haven't seen The Vanishing yet, but The Killing, the AMC version, and the Danish version of The Killing, they're both fantastic series. I would highly recommend them. They're both incredible, incredible series. Now, before we dive into the Enfield Haunting and all the wonderful phenomenon that they... Oh, you can really hear her purring right now. Okay, buddy. Here. You should get down. Thank you. I didn't realize she'd be purring so loudly. I will say that I was pleasantly surprised to see Matthew McFadden as Guy Lyon Playfair. I absolutely loved him in Spooks. And, he looks great with longer hair. He's a wonderful man, great actor, beautiful, handsome boy. Now, in the Enfield Haunting series, the old man is a major plot point in the series. The tension that I felt throughout the series was intense, right? I was on the edge of my seat throughout the whole series. There was a few jump scares, nothing really got me like that, but overall, the tension that was in the series was very profound, very compelling. So, when we're looking at the footage that they're showing, you could see that ghostly visions on camera, they signal the arrival of the poltergeist, and there's a lot of static and stuff on screen. And then you see You have levitations, you have vengeful spirits, you have blood. This series had it all. It really encompassed the Enfield Haunting very well. I really enjoyed the performance that Eleanor Worthington Cox. You have to say it. feel like you have to say that with like a Eleanor Worthington Cox. Whatever. We'll move on. I feel like you have to say it like that. But, the commitment that she gave during the show and during her possessions and her hauntings and her making the voices or acting out the voices, it was very compelling. She did a very good job. I really believe that she was actually fearful and she was worried for her safety. I don't know if that's a good thing. Hopefully she actually wasn't worried for her safety, but she did a very good job in this series. And, it was really, really creepy to see someone so young have such a gravelly, raspy old man voice. There's one scene where they attempt to prove that Janet isn't the one making the voice, that the voice is coming from outside of her. And this is something that I actually didn't touch on. They did some of the same techniques in the Enfield Haunting series as they did in the actual Enfield Poltergeist series, like the true story. So they were trying to test Janet and see if she, to see if she was actually making the voices herself or if it was Bill the ghost. And so what they did was they put water in her mouth. In the series, they put water in her mouth and they tape it shut. And the voice still comes out even though Janet is unable to speak or her lips aren't moving. And so Janet did say in the interview that they did that to her, that they had put water in her mouth and the voices kept coming out of her. It didn't matter how they tried to manipulate her so that she wasn't actually moving her lips. The voices still continued to be disembodied and to come out of her or seemingly come out of her. So watching that scene was pretty wild. Watching the voice take over in other people. I don't know if that happened in real life. But in the series, the voice manipulates other individuals like her sister Margaret, and that was really frightening as well. Throughout the show, the girls are haunted by forces throwing things across the room. There's swarms of insects smothering them and biting at their faces. There's pounding on the walls. There's possessions. And after all of that, the one thing that I thought that was really insane was someone telling a story about a possessed boy vomiting up a frog. That was a really loud bang. I'm going to do that again because I'm going to edit this later. I think my neighbors, they must be, there's got to be something haunting them because I can hear it over here. One thing that was insane was insane was someone telling a story about a possessed boy vomiting up a frog. And now I thought that would be very, very intense. So, just to close off the episode, we don't actually have any announcements coming up because we're pretty much at the end of the month. And by the time this episode comes out, we're already going to have our Halloween convention. We're already going to have our Halloween party. And we're already going to have our Halloween movie nights. So I really don't have a whole lot to announce. But, you should check out the Discord. We have book clubs every month or every 2 months. We have movie nights usually on every month or, routinely. We have some amazing, absolutely incredible people in our Discord server. Again, shout out to Wolf's Lore and Hallie91 and Lulu and everyone in the Discord server. You folks are absolutely wonderful people, and it's just incredible. You should really check out our Discord server, and maybe you can help drop some true crime, some alien, some cryptid, folklore, spooky knowledge. Everything. And we have a lot of connection with other podcasters as well. I guess I'll leave it up to you to decide what you feel the Enfield Haunting or the Enfield Poltergeist actually was. To me, I believe it. I think it's one of the most credible sources of a poltergeist or a paranormal haunting experience. But I'll leave it up to you. You can decide what you feel. Because, there is evidence that the girls did fake a couple of the incidents that occurred. But that's pretty much all I have. That's all the research that I could find. So, yes, thank you. Thanks again for checking out the show, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. Cheers.
Looking for a podcast all about nerddom? Want a podcast with an emphasis on representation?
The Nerd Alternative is the podcast for you. Join me, Ram.
Me, Hassan.
And me, Levi.
3 black British nerds tackling the pop culture we love and sharing why we love them. The Nerd Alternative, a sweet melting pot of all things nerdy.
This episode is produced by Death Hotel Creative, hosted by myself, Dr. Mystery. To view more and to grab your exclusive Cabinet of Mystery merch, visit us at notwhatwesay.com. Check out our Instagram handle at Cabinet of Mystery or our Twitter at Open the Cabinet. Please leave us a review if you enjoyed the show and let us know what topics you'd like to hear in the future. You can hit us up either on the socials or at cabinetofmystery@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voice message and appear in upcoming episodes, leave us a voicemail at anchor.fm/Cabinet of Mystery. And don't forget, if you ever catch us on Bullhorn, you can always call in and you can chat with us while we're live.